and gentlemen, it is Evening for Managers 24th edition from the Institute of Chartered Professional Managers of Sri Lanka. And the interesting topic today is raising the retirement age, the pros and the cons. Recently concluded budget speech of Prime Minister Mahinda Rajapaksa, he confirmed that the age of, basically the retirement age has to move to 60 years. So we will go through this interesting topic as the raising the retirement age pros and cons for this Evening for Managers forum. Evening for Managers program is the highest, most viewed program with the over 300 participants usually. And it is the only program that discusses vivid topics, very objective and timely topics, um, to enhance your knowledge tremendously. With that in mind, we have today President and Founder of Chartered Professional Managers Sri Lanka, Professor Lakshman R. Watavala, who is the live wire, backbone and the strategist behind CPM Sri Lanka. Professor, good evening to you.
Good evening.
Right. And we have three brilliant people who's going to host this, what you call, very interesting topic today. And let me introduce the keynote speaker and the two panelists for your information. Right. We have Mr. Rohan Dunuvilla, attorney at law. And let me read out a brief profile about Mr. Rohan. How are you, sir, by the way?
Thank you. Doing good. Thank you for having me.
Right. Mr. Rohan Dunuvilla, after passing out from law college, he was enrolled as an attorney at law of the Supreme Court on the 13th December 2001. Having completed his internship and apprenticeship under the Distinguished President's Council, L.C. Senevirat Square, and G. Nihal Fernandez Square, leading practitioner in both original and appellate courts, he moved to Employees Federation of Ceylon, an institution renowned for its expertise in the area of employment law, industrial relations, and human resource management. He rejoined the unofficial bar and worked as a counsel under L.C. Seneviratne, PC, and G.N. Fernandez, PC, during the period 2004 to 2011, consequent to which he was founding partner of Aquitas Legal in 2011. He has over 19 years experience in commercial and corporate law, employment law, construction law, and arbitration and general civil law. He regularly advises and appears for some of the country's leading private public companies and banks, as well as several blue chip companies. Since rejoining the unofficial bar, he has specialized in the area of industrial relations and human resource management and employment law, and at present is retained by several firms, companies, and banks in relation to the said area of expertise. So we have the keynote speaker, Mr. Rohan Dunuvilla, attorney at law. And then we have two panelists, and they are, panelist number one, Dr. Dinesh Hamangoda, a veteran business strategist, right? And he's well-experienced professional with more than 22 years experience in the field of sales, marketing, supply chain, and business development, general management, including stints in two leading multinational companies in Sri Lanka. He started his career in 1998 as a junior executive at Sampath Bank, Treasury, and in 2001, he joined Unilever Sri Lanka as a management trainee. During his Unilever stint, he functioned as a sales manager, then moved up to senior brand manager, business development manager, head of demand and business planning, head of marketing, Unilever Food Solutions Sri Lanka, Maldives. After covering a 13-year spell at Unilever in FMCG, he joined Holcim Lanka as a marketing manager. Dr. Dinesh joined Navaloka Group as the CEO for East West Marketing Private Limited in January 2017 and achieved Slim Brand Excellence Award for Turkey brand in 2018. After successful 3 years at East West Dr. Dinesh is now currently the General Manager Sales in Hema's consumer brands uh, at the moment. During his 23-year corporate career, he has completed 2 foreign at Unilever Philippines and Unilever India assignments. Dr. Dinesh is a past pupil of Nalanda College, Colombo. He obtained his doctorate from the University of Kelaniya 2020 and holds a first-class BSc honors degree from University of New Delhi under Indian Cultural Scholarship Scheme. He also an MBA from Postgraduate Institute of Management and a professional banker with AIB qualifications and fellow Chartered Institute of Marketing UK. In addition, he is a lecturer, mentor, corporate trainer, specialized sales motivation and leadership training. He is a permanent faculty member for marketing strategy for PIM Alumni Senior Management Development Program. Dinesh, Dr. Dinesh is a visiting lecturer for MBA, MSc, MBS, and EMBA programs in the University of Colombo, University of Kelaniya, Cardiff Metropolitan University, and Edith Cowan University. How are you, Dr. Dinesh?
Hi. Good evening, Hashan. Thanks.
Right. You're welcome, doctor. Right. Let's move on to panelist number 2, Dr. Anuradha Iddagoda. How are you, doctor?
I'm fine, Mr. Hashan, and
Right,
thank you
good.
for this invitation.
Okay. Right. Let me read out your profile. She is a researcher and a senior lecturer. She is currently working at the University of Jayewardenepura Management Science Unit, Applied Science Faculty. Dr. Anuradha holds a PhD from the University of Sri Jayewardenepura, a Master of Business Administration in Human Resource Management from the Postgraduate Institute of Management, University of Sri Jayewardenepura, a Master of Information Technology, postgraduate degree, Bachelor of Information Technology, both from Charles Sturt University, Australia. Dr. Anuradha is focusing more research on human resource management. Her current project is employee engagement, personal character, green HRM, high performance work practice, and leadership are other research areas that she has already done research. Wow. She has published several articles, including Web of Science, Scopus, ABDC, and Copernicus Index journals. She has been a guest researcher at the Department of Sociology and Work Science in the University of Gothenburg, Sweden. Okay, too heavy to swallow. Right, so we'll welcome the keynote speaker and the panelists. Also behind us, we have Mr. Dinesh Hamangoda, the Director, CPM, and his fabulous team connecting us live from Colombo to you and across the globe. Good evening to you, Dilshan, wherever you are. Right, okay, people, we are good to go. And there'll be people watching us now, and they'll be raising questions, right? To start the proceedings, please welcome Professor Lakshman R. Vatawala, Founder, Chairman of CPM, to welcome you all. Over to you, sir.
Thank you, Hashan. Good evening to all our eminent panel who are present here. I think they have been very well introduced. But I must say that there is a good mix in our panel. Eminent lawyer, very conversant with the human resource and the managerial area, then the academic area which will be covered, and of course the business side. So we have a very good mix, and I'm sure that this will enable our participants to get a good knowledge on raising the retirement age pros and cons. Another special feature of our eminent panel is that they are all youthful, very youthful. So they are really going to speak on retirement age, which I'm sure all of you would like to get their views. I would like to say a little about our CPM, the Chartered Professional Managers. This is the one of the prime professional management bodies in Sri Lanka. And as a professional management body, our main duty is to ensure that we are able to produce professional managers and also enhance the quality and the skills of those who are currently employed in this field. So that's why we have this Evening for Managers program, which is In professional terms, it's called continuing professional development. This is something that is very essential in all fields, but we are finding it lacking in many areas, especially the public sector, which is far behind us, because international professional bodies and even our own body, if you do not comply with the CPD hours that are put in, 20 hours that you should put in for a year, you will not be able to renew your membership. Now, those are the strict criteria that are there, and I think the government should ensure that CPD is introduced, because they are under false notion that once you get a degree, you know everything, and the government must ensure that they get a job. So I think that's the wrong notion they have. But let us look at our topic itself. Now, one of the, as I said, of the CPM, then of course we provide the membership, 3 grades of membership that are there: the associate, the member, and the fellowship. So these are 3 grades that are available, and we also conduct the very special program of management and entrepreneurship. These are professional program that we are doing. 3 stages that we have: the certificate level, the diploma, and the advanced diploma, which will finally entitle you to get membership of the institute. So these a program that is much in demand, management and entrepreneurship. A lot of them talk of it, but our program of management and entrepreneurship is not only theory, but also the practical aspects, and where we have good lecturers who will be conducting it. So definitely you will be able to get more information from our director, Mr. Devsan Aruskuratna, whom you can contact and get the details. Now, speaking on today's topic, that is of course raising the retirement age, pros and cons, there are some very, very important elements in this. I thought I'll just speak a few words, because with the sort of experience and what we have seen. Now, if you look at now the definition of the retirement age, now this is really a major problem. The government is taking maybe 55 as a retirement age, and whether now they were in the budget, they wanted to increase it to 60 years. Of course, a lot of protests were coming from here and there, but we need to look at the whole sphere as such, which I'm sure the eminent panel will be able to speak. But today, normally we talk of 60 years as the age of retirement. So that's what we normally take. If you take in all our research studies and others, that's a sort of age that is taken. But there is one very, very important aspect that we need to look at, because Sri Lanka is really facing a very, very serious problem, because the number aging are increasing. In 2017, it was 14%, but currently it is in the range of 20 to 22%. Now, this is something that is worrying everyone, and maybe the reason that why the government also considered that this retiring age should be increased. Then the other area that you should look into is the median age. You see, now maybe during our time it was 21. They say the age increased from 21.4, the median age, and it has gone up to 31 years. Now, this is a very, very serious problem. You know, see, when you consider retiring age, if we don't look at the entry criteria, then we are in a serious problem. And I don't think anyone has really looked at this one. And of course, the life expectancy going up to 72 or 79 years. But the main thing is you have a very good school education going up to maybe completing it. And then once you complete it, then only the rot starts. You see, from there, because you see those days, when they say this median age 21, that would have been the age that they would have qualified and gone for a job. But now this age has really increased, but no action has been taken to solve this. So this will have a really big impact on the aging. Now, supposing if you say now, if it has gone from 21 to 31, that is 10 years. So then if you say 55, then your retirement age should be 65. Now, I'm just telling so that our panelists and the speakers will be able to speak on this. So we are really facing a very, very serious problem. And I think although everyone is talking of the school education, it is really not the school education that is really the problem in this country. It is the tertiary education. If they do not solve this problem, we will be in serious trouble. So this aging also one has to look because of family planning and other things that are done, but that also has resulted in a problem because it's not applicable to all in the same proportion. So there is another problem there which one may have to look into. So I think these are some of the matters that I thought that I'll bring to the notice, which I'm sure that our speakers and panelists will be able to handle. I'm very thankful to them for accepting our invitation. Also, our moderator, Hashan, who's been doing a very excellent job, and of course our director, Mr. Dilshan Alsuguratna, who's been really handling these matters and helping a great deal. And we have a lot of our members who are present here. Let me welcome them also, and also the others. And I wish this seminar a great success, and that we will be able to make certain recommendations to the government based on the seminar that we are doing now. That's something that we are now looking at, because everything that we do, we are looking at value creation. What is the value that we are creating if we have this seminar? What is the value that you are creating if you are working? What is the value that you are creating for the salary that you are paid? Now, this is how things are measured, especially in this COVID-19 pandemic that we have to go through. I hope everyone will be taking care of yourself, because this is very essential, because even the younger people are now getting the COVID-19. So which means that if you do not follow rules and procedures, then you will be in serious trouble. And these rules and procedures are not only in the health sector, but also in all other sectors like the management field. If we do not follow the rules and procedures, we will all be in a meeting. So with that introduction, I would like to welcome all of you and wish the seminar all success.
Right, thank you, Professor Vatawala. That's a fantastic eye-opener. And with that note, I mean, you highlighted a key aspect, that is the aging population of Sri Lanka, plus the tertiary education is the real problem. It's not anything else. So this is a great eye-opener for the panelists to consider once the what you call when it comes to the later discussions. So with that, we will now open the chat box. You all can put your questions in for the discussion as we proceed to the keynote address, and the keynote will be done by Mr. Rohan Dunavila, and we would like you to take over the proceedings now.
Thank you, Hashan. Thank you, Professor Vatawala. I think that the introduction was, as Hashan said, very informative. Firstly, let me thank the Institute of Chartered Professional Managers of Sri Lanka for inviting me as the key presenter to discuss the proposed new legislation regarding the age of retirement in Sri Lanka. The government's introduction of the age of retirement by way of a statute has its advantages and disadvantages, which we will discuss during today's webinar. It is important to note that the proposed piece of legislation is not unique to Sri Lanka, and a comparative study of other jurisdictions will further add credence to the decision of the government. We will look at that as we go along. Historically, in this country, the state regulated the age of retirement for government sector employees, with the freedom being given to private institutions to decide and incorporate an age of retirement in respect of its own employees. At present, there are 31 statutes that govern employment law in Sri Lanka, and the present proposed bill, if passed into law, will become 32nd piece of legislation. As you all are probably aware, this piece of legislation will have significant impact on businesses in the short and long term. As we go forward, we'll look at those aspects as well. As Professor Vatawala pointed out, the two of the key proposals by the Honorable Mahinda Rajapaksa Prime Minister and the Finance Minister were twofold. One was the introduction of a contributory pension scheme for the self-employed. Secondly, was to extend the age of retirement of workers covered under the EPF law up to the age of 60. When looking at that budget speech, the primary intention as per the speech was to regularize the current retirement age for the purposes of the EPF, as same is different based on gender. Section 23A of the EPF Act states that a member of the fund shall be paid the total amount lying to the credit of such member's individual account as soon as practicable after such member, being a male, attains the age of 55 years or being a female, attains the age of 50 years. Based on the current life expectancy, the purpose is to remove this gender-based approach between men and women. Thinking behind females being able to retire at 50, when the EPF Act was enacted as far back as 1958, was primarily based on such persons being able to retire sooner and enjoy the fruits of their labor and contribute towards their family and family well-being. The current life expectancy in Sri Lanka for men is 72 years of age and women is 77. At the time of the enforcement of the EPF Act, it was 58.8 years for men and 57.5 for females. Prior to getting into an analysis of the bill that is before us today, I think it's important just to briefly run through a few neighboring countries and how they have addressed this issue of retirement age. Singapore is currently facing an increasing aging population caused by increased life expectancy coupled with decreasing birth rates. In 2018, it had one of the highest life expectancies in the world. As of 2017, however, Singapore had the lowest fertility rate of the world with only 0.83 children per woman. By 2035, it is estimated that around 32% of Singaporeans will be age 65 and above, while the median age was also expected to rise from 37.9 in 2015 to 53.4 in 2050. This demographic shift places pressure on Singaporean society as a shrinking workforce struggles to support this aging population. The Retirement and Re-employment Act of 1993 in Singapore raised the minimum retirement age to 62. Employers must re-employ qualified employees who turn 62 up to the age of 67. The statute itself provides for exceptions. That is to say that those who are not having a satisfactory work performance or not being medically fit to continue in working. Singapore will raise the retirement age to 63 and the re-employment age to 65 from 1st July 2022, which will help keep track of increase in the retirement age to 65 and the re-employment age to 70 by the end of 2030, according to Manpower Minister Josephine Teo. The employees will still be allowed to withdraw some money from their Central Provident Fund account starting at the age of 55 to receive CPF payouts starting at the age of 65. The United Kingdom, the compulsory age of retirement is 65, but this law was scrapped in April 2011 by the Employment Equality Repeal of Retirement Age Provision Regulation of 2011. The compulsory retirement by an employer will be an unfair dismissal, age discrimination under the Equality Act of 2010, unless can be objectively justified. Employers have more choice, but when they want to retire, and pension schemes can continue to have pensionable age to release benefits. The Pensions Act of 2014 provides for a regular review of the state pension age at least once every 5 years. The state pension age has been undergoing radical changes since April 2010. Changes we will see the state pension age rise to 65 for women between 2010 and 2018, and then to 67, 68 for both men and women thereafter. There are plans to change state pension ages further. There are nearly 12 million people aged 65 and above in the United Kingdom as at present. By 2030, it is estimated that 1 in 5 people in the UK, that is roughly about 22%, will be aged over 65. In India, there are few pension schemes: Employee Provident Fund, Public Provident Fund, and other occupational pension schemes. As India has a large informal economy, 81% roughly of employment is informal in India. The National Old Age Pension Scheme is an important benefit for older people. The current retirement age in India is 60 years old, 60 years. It is at this stage that individuals can begin to withdraw their state pension. The working population will increase by about 9.7 million a year between 2021 and 2031, but will slow to 4.2 million during 2031 to 2041. At the other spectrum, India has been seen a big increase to the life expectancy of healthy older people. A healthy 60-year-old man can expect to live for 12.5 years more, whereas a woman can expect to live for 13.3 years more. Nearly 240 million aged 60 or over in 2041 compared to just 100 million in 2011. Retirement age in India, the current retirement age for most government workers in India is 60, although this varies from state to state. There have been calls to regularize this across the country. The private sector retirement age in India tends not to set a retirement age as such, like we have presently in Sri Lanka. Those that do tend to set ages between 58 to 65 of age, and this can be extended at the company's discretion. Coming to Sri Lanka, the proportion of elderly population in Sri Lanka is higher than in any other South Asian country. In 2001, over 9% of Sri Lankan population was over the age of 60, which is a relatively large elderly population for a developing country. During the period 2010 to 2041, it is estimated that the Sri Lankan population will increase moderately by about 9%, up to about 22 million. During this period, the elderly population, that is 60 and above, will increase from 2.5 million in 2010 to estimated 5.3 million by 2041, an increase of over 100% or doubling of the elderly population in this country. By 2041, about a quarter, that is 24.8% of Sri Lankan population, will be 60 years or above. Now, at present, the age of retirement of persons employed is governed by contract. Employers generally dictate the age of retirement depending on company policy and surrounding circumstances. We have seen that certain companies have stipulated the age of retirement at 55, with some going up to 60 or beyond. We have, however, seen that most companies, depending on the competency of the employee, tend to extend these contracts for a further period by way of a fixed term contract or rehire the competent employees on consultancy contracts and so on. On the contrary, the Establishments Code, Chapter 5 of Volume 2, the state sector age of retirement was set at 55 years of age, with extensions permissible until the age of 60 in certain circumstances. The government is seeking to now regularize this across the board, but a key feature of this new act is exempting state employees. In other words, their age of retirement will remain at 55 under the Establishments Code, with select employees being granted extensions up to 60 as the case may be. Let me quickly run through the proposed salient features of the bill. By Section 2, the minimum age of retirement age is set at 60 and shall override any and all provisions in any other written law, contract of employment or collective agreement. Section 3 says all employees shall be employed until their age of 60 years, save and except where employees are exempt under Section 7 of this Act. And if such employee has, if an employer has less than 10 employees in the 12 months immediately preceding the date of retirement of such employees. So Section 7 of this proposed Act seeks to exclude a certain class of people, and any employers who have less than 10 employees in the immediate 12 months preceding the date of retirement. Now, in terms of Section 7, the exempt employees will be employees of the government, provincial councils, local governments, societies registered under Cooperative Society Act, religious and charitable organizations, foreign employees, that is non-citizens who are employed in this country, trainees, apprentices, temporary workers, fixed-term contract workers, seasonal employees, part-time workers, and daily wage earners. It also excludes domestic servants and drivers. Section 4, the exempted occasions of retiring prior to attaining the age of 60 is if the employee is of ill health, terminated due to disciplinary action, enforcement of a statutory law, closure of a company or part of a company, retrenchment, etc. under the Termination Act. Now, it is important again to note that this Act does not qualify or give a definition of, say, for example, where the circumstances under which an employee can be deemed not medically fit to be retired prior to 60. Those are aspects that probably will be debated in Parliament, and hopefully adequate provisions will be brought in to cover that. Section 5(1) of the Act says that the employee, however, has a discretion of retiring prior to the age of 60. Section 5(2), an employer can terminate the services of an employee on the written consent of an employee or prior written approval of the Commissioner of Labour under the Termination Act. Again, these are situations where there's closure of business, downsizing, reorganizing of a company, and you're overstaffed, situations such as that. There's an important aspect in Section 5(3), which says that if an employee has completed 25 years in service under one employer and attained the age of 50, the employer is given the discretion to retire that employee at the age of 50. This goes against the norm of the substance of the Act or the scheme of the Act, and makes you wonder why such a provision has been brought in. Again, 6(1) says any condition in a contract of employment relating to the age of retirement, collective agreements, etc., shall become null and void. Any provision of a contract which limits or excludes the applicability of this Act will be null and void. Section 8 says that an employee retiring an employee before the age of 60, the Commissioner is given special powers to inquire into a complaint of an employee and make determinations. But the key feature of this provision is that the complaint must be made within 6 months of the date the said employee is retired. Now we can draw parallel to the Industrial Disputes Act, where there has been a termination for indiscipline or whatever reason. An employee can go to the labor tribunal within 6 months. So this is a similar provision where there is a time bar imposed on an employee to complain of a retirement or a forced retirement to the Commissioner of Labour prior to the reaching of the age of 60, by which the Commissioner is empowered by this proposed statute to inquire into it and grant relief to the employee concerned. Section 10 deals with the relief the Commissioner can give an employee who has been retired prior to reaching the age of 60. The Commissioner General can reinstate such employee in the same position without a break in service and order the payment of emoluments due to such employee during that period. So in essence, regardless of the competency or circumstances under which the employee was terminated, save and except the exempt provisions that I referred to above, that employee essentially is forced back into employment, or on the contrary, the employee is forced to re-employ that person until the age of 60. In the event there is closure of a business or reinstatement becomes impractical, as an alternative, the commissioner is empowered to grant compensation based on the last drawn salary payable up to the age of 60. Now we see this again a parallel from the Industrial Disputes Act, where reinstatement becomes impractical if there is animosity, for example, between the employer and the employee. And reinstating such a person can have an adverse impact on the business at large. Now, Section 11 gives the right of an appeal of sorts to an employer aggrieved by the decision of a commissioner. Again, this is a important proviso to this section, which I will explain in a bit. This Act gives the power to the Court of Appeal to an action to be by way of a writ application. An employer can challenge the decision of the commissioner in respect of reinstatement or grant of compensation. What is important here is that this provision is in existence today as well in respect of any order of the commissioner under any of the 31 statutes that I referred to earlier. The important aspect here and a key deviation from the other statutes is that in order to make that application to the Court of Appeal by way of a writ application, the compensation ordered must be deposited in full with the Commissioner of Labour. In the event the order of the Commissioner is for back wages and reinstatement, the employer must deposit the said back wages and salary for the balance period until retirement into 12 times. So there's a massive financial implication here for companies where they have to deposit the computation of back wages and the balance period into 12 times. Upon that money being handed over to the commissioner, a certificate will be issued to the employer, without which the Court of Appeal is becomes in effect defunct and can't consider that application. Like any other employment statute in this country, violation of any of these provisions is an offense, and there is a fine of 5,000 or imprisonment up to 6,000 or either or both. As in majority of the employment statutes in this country, there is personal liability on directors, officers, partners if it's a partnership, president, secretary, etc. if it's an unincorporated body. Now those are some of the salient key features of this piece of legislation, proposed piece of legislation. Now it also falls on us to discuss the pros and cons of this legislation, as I'm sure the other eminent panelists will also discuss. From an employer's point of view, some of the pros would be the use of knowledge and experience of an employee who is very familiar with the structure and the business. Instead of having to retrain or rehire people with limited knowledge in respect of how each individual company operates. Therefore, less training costs and less recruitments. Some of the key cons would be internal promotion issues, where people are waiting to be promoted once their superior goes on retirement. No discussion on deciding on the age of retirement. Different industries need different skill sets, the skills of certain people can deteriorate over time, lack of interest with age. There are a lot of aspects that are now taken out of the control of an employer, who is now forced to keep such people in employment regardless of their performance. Because performance is not an element under which you can retire anybody early in terms of this bill. there's another aspect, financial aspect, burden that will be cast upon companies and employers would be having to make provision for additional gratuity for 5 years, EPF, ETF contributions, increments in salary, and so on. Those who have not made provisioning will now be forced to re-evaluate their financials and make provisioning for all this as the years go by. With that comes the larger pay caps, less cash flow with the current economy, where people are in this present context with COVID and downsizing and reinventing businesses. Piece of legislation coming in at this stage may not be the best thing for the economy as a whole. It also means that because of certain restrictions in having a staff cadre, younger employees or graduates from universities, youngsters with fresh ideas, skill sets, cannot be employed for want of vacancies in a company. These are some of the aspects I believe that ought to be considered, and maybe even give more certain exemptions where employers are given a better opportunity to evaluate depending on the business requirements. Now, from an employee's point of view, there are several pros. You are looking for financial stability till the age of 60. There's job security. We have as I said before, we have an aging population. Sri Lankan culture is generally such that the family always looks after their elders, but unfortunately we see a deviation from that age-old culture and traditions of this country where, in fairness to many youngsters, they don't have the financial capacity to look after their elders anymore. So this will take that burden of new couples, youngsters who have elderly parents who are employable now till the age of 60. With that comes enhanced terminal benefits by way of gratuity and provident fund and so on. The other aspect is in the Employee Provident Fund Act, like I said earlier, a female can withdraw her provident fund at the age of 50 and a male at 55. Like I said, in Singapore and other jurisdictions, there are options to withdraw at various stages depending on your requirements. So this bill is silent on that aspect. So technically speaking, there might be a conflict of laws here as to when an employee will be permitted to withdraw their benefits. The Act is silent on that, whether they have to wait till now, till 60, in considering the budget speech. My understanding would be that all employees will be compelled to wait till the age of 60 to make withdrawals on their provident fund. Now, another aspect is that this comes at a time when a few weeks ago, maybe a month or two ago, there was an increase in the compensation payable under the Termination Act. The Termination Act, the minister gazetted a formula for payment of compensation with a maximum cap of 1,250,000. Now that was increased to 2.5 million, doubled roughly about 6 weeks ago. Now we have a situation where this bill will soon become law, and a lot of companies may need to look at retrenchment in order to meet certain business requirements. Now this also means that their financial commitment towards retrenchment has doubled. And in the event of closure of business, downsizing, restructuring, now there's a huge financial burden placed on employers now how to manage this whole situation. Now, another aspect is in the event the employer is of the view that an employee between the age of 55 and 60 is not suited to the business or lacks the required skill, such employee would have to apply to the Commission of Labour for TEVA or retrenchment. Now, again, this comes back to what I just spoke a few seconds ago. And again, the financial impact on companies or employers will be fairly prohibitive, and most employers may now be compelled to just keep people on till age of 60 without getting any productivity out of them, or the benefits that, or the workload that they intend to get from an employee. From a government perspective, some of the pros would be that the government can hold on to the provident fund, the funds in the provident fund for a longer period of 5 years more. As at present, also as at the end of 2019, the asset base was something like 2,500 billion, which funds are generally used for various other purposes, development purposes, etc. The EPF and ETF will get additional contributions for the next 5 years, additional 5 years. Less social security, social benefits, healthcare responsibilities on senior citizens as they now earn till the age of 60. But the burden of the government is essentially will be reduced in respect of those aspects as well. Another aspect that the government need to consider in enacting bills of this nature is the fact that the unemployment rate of youth coming into the job market is likely to increase, with less opportunities available for jobs in companies in the private sector as a whole. As a result, we may have a situation where job-oriented migration, brain drain, etc., will be heightened. We all know that it's prevalent as of now, but we are looking at possibly a bigger impact as we go forward. Some of the general concerns that I saw in studying this bill was that there is no clear provision as to who gets to decide, for example, whether an employee is fit or unfit for employment. Section 4 sets out that point, but it doesn't have a body or a authority that could determine this matter, and could obviously end up in a dispute. Again, like I said earlier, the act is silent as to when the provident fund benefits, etc., can be withdrawn by these employees. Again, one must also, while being pragmatic and looking at the positives of this whole piece of legislation, there are concerns about the real intentions of the government in holding back a fund with about 2,500 billion. Whether it's for use of government expenditure, which would in effect be contrary to the whole purpose and the scheme of the Provident Fund Act, for which it is a safety net for employees of the private sector. If it's used for other areas of government expenditure, which is not interest generating or beneficial to these employees who contribute to the fund, it can have a drastic adverse impact on the employees who throughout their lifetime has been contributing towards this fund. So these are some of the key elements that needs to be looked at and discussed as time goes by. So Hashan, I think that about sums up my take on this piece of legislation. And forward. Thank you.
Right, Rohan. It was basically it's an eye opener. Rohan, thanks for the keynote address. I mean, it's dose of legislation facts that runs into the two panelists discussions as well, where you highlighted the key, the Singapore aspect, the UK aspect of retirement. So basically, Rohan, it's we just increased it to 60, but they were now planning to move further beyond. That's one fact that I gathered, and also you mentioned that the youth might lose certain opportunities, and people might get into various aspects of giving them employment on a different notion with regards to this act. And also you mentioned that this act is silent on the withdrawals of the benefits of the EPF, right? Rohan. So that's a kind of a grave concern. So basically, you covered 80% of the cons, and I mean, I know Dr. Dinesh is that's the topic that he is about to embark upon. But on a legislation point of view, that uh, since we are supposed to discuss the pros and the cons, you kind of indicator that it can be a monstrous, it can be a daredevil action that can trigger a different aspect altogether. But in other countries, there are backups, there are plans that India is at 60, UK at 65, and Singapore going into 70. And also 2041, 5.3 will be the aging population with regards to Sri Lanka. Am I right, Rohan, on that aspect? So basically, we are heading towards an aging population, and your categorization of the sections, which you might need to elaborate again on a point of conversation at the center of the whole thing, because it's vital. I mean, those sections, and one Viva has already asked for a kind of a summarization of what you have told, because now these basically not in the news. These can be discussed only on a forum like this, right? So thank you, Rohan, for that. I mean, dose of legislative facts as the keynote address before I move into the panelists. So viewers can now post their questions on the Q&A or the chat box, and I will now move into Dr. Dinesh. You're a legendary character on the what do you call the private sector, Dr. Dinesh, and with your experience, you know, it's huge, right? So as per the notification in the private sector, the retirement age is now moves to 60, right? Can you explain the cons that can take place in the private sector, right? If you can elaborate as a private sector mastery, how this can affect the private sector or the cons, Doctor. Over to you.
Yeah. Thank you, Hashan, Professor Watawala, and my eminent panelists, and all the participants who have connected online. And good evening to everyone. Yes, it's a good question, Hashan. In my 23-year, private sector life, I have worked for two, big multinationals and three blue chip Sri Lankan companies. So I have noticed, even you all have also noticed, there are few symptoms, you have noticed, which are not written in textbooks and in academic, those were not properly basically discussed. One is get into a situation like once you're about to, after you have given resignation, you get a anemia call, psychologically you get, basically resign. That means you don't do anything, substantial to the company. You don't at value basically after you have submitted the resignation. And if there are so many projects coming on board, you're not getting into the participation. So lots of things happening after you have tendered the resignation. Same, suppose you are a few years to get retired. Suppose you are in the age of 50s and 52s, you get a symptom call, an anemia call, a psychological retirement. I have clearly seen this in private sector. In my 22-year career, I have seen many occasions. When you pass this 50, 52, 55 life, you psychologically get retired. You think like, few years to go, no promotions would come, no salary increases would come, no passion into work. When you're given additional responsibilities, you will some or other avoid those. And you will get into a lot of politics, and you're getting into a survival mode. You just want to survive till you retire. Then that if you're in a multinational, you won't be, nominated for expatriation. If you're, unless otherwise you're in assistant, deputy CEO level, you don't have ambition to get into the CEO. If you're a manager level, you will simply, give it up. So no innovations would come, I have seen this in particularly, this lethargy component is purely coming into that. You're getting into a completely comfortable zone. And basically you won't, target for a career, progression, no educational qualification will be added. So it's coming to a standstill. So after you have become a basically non-value adding expensive asset to the company, and you're asking company to extend that 55 to 60. So what the additional cost to the company? And in addition to that, I have seen the generation gap. I mean, they are not conversant in IT. They don't want to getting into online. They don't basically getting into millennials. They hate. I mean, lot of ego I have seen in private sector, with due respect to all my senior colleagues, because I am just speaking about the section of the senior guys. I mean, I have seen brilliant, people even working sparklingly in age of 60 as well. But a certain, a majority of 50+% I have seen this. And suppose you are asking to, a lot of companies are basically waiting till these people leave the organization. So if you're asking me to enhance by 50 to 60, if you're going to, lay them out, the VRS cost, huge cost for VRSs. So that will be additional burdens, the real con. And I can easily in private sector get a, young graduate, dynamic, passionate graduate, and get the same job done at a cheaper cost. If the senior guy costs me 100,000, I can easily get it done through an executive. I mean, even a tacit knowledge is speechless, but easily doable. With 75% cost reduction will be there. So if you're going to increase that 55 to 60, it will be an additional, burden to the company. Salary cost is very high, because if you're extending that 55 to 60, anyway, these guys will stay at 60. And another thing is, when it comes to the social life, not coming from the private sector, context. Now look at your grandchildren. Many of the grandchildren are, taken care of by the grandparents. So I know some families, some wives are waiting till their, fathers are getting retired to, hand over the kids, because the maid cost is, exorbitant. You can't maintain a good maid and look after your kids properly. So if you extend that to 50 to 60, that will be another, social issue as well. And on the other hand, we basically, in private sector, we go through a lot of hassle and extreme tension till year of 55. And you're extending that to 60, you are not giving any break to your basic life. You don't get into meditation, in your recreation, any sort of a thing. I mean, no one will start such a thing in normal life. After they are waiting till after the retirement age comes. Another thing was, especially if you're releasing this type of people by 60, some are basically physically not capable enough to grasp a new learning curve. If you release them by 55, I'll give you a good example. These military officials, they are getting into new responsibilities. But if you ask them to come after 60s, they are not physically capable. But if you come into new learning curves after 55, you can grasp a lot of new things and, get into a new, learning curve, and they can sustain even up to 70. Another thing is, I think our keynote speaker also properly covered that, if you don't flush out the, the garbage from your backyard, you don't have provisions to, invite new young graduates to come in and, provisions to give good promotions. In this generation, Hashan, you would have also experienced, if you don't give promotion to even a younger guy who have completed 2 to 3 years, they'll leave the organization. So they want to be the CEO, at the age of 35. In my father's age, CEOs, the level was, 50 plus. Now they want to be the CEO by, 30 years. But in that context, if you're keeping that, the expensive non-value adding asset in the organization, it will be a huge pandemonium. So those are the few elements from my side.
Right, Dr. Dinesh. I mean, that gives a lead way. I'm so lucky to have. I'm so lucky. I'm one of the luckiest moderators because Rohan basically set the stage on the legal framework, and you touch upon the sectors and the cons that can lead into a misery by increasing the age to 60. I mean,
Hashan, I missed one point. Now, especially we are talking about this entrepreneurship. you know,
Right.
a lot of people are waiting to start on their own after the retirement. So if you extend that by another 50, no one will get into on their own by 60. So a lot of complication you're opening up for if you're giving to, you know, retain them up to 60.
And also, and yeah, you touch upon social issues. You know, it can cause a social issue where your children want you to retire quickly, but now you can't, right?
Can't.
And also stress levels, like you and I are sharing at the moment. Right? Are we fit? I mean, can we have a proper retirement? Yeah, and also the pandemic issues can also creep in, right?
Correct.
You never know, right? And once you get COVID, you can't get insured. That's another line.
Correct.
Right? And then physically you're not fit. That's one aspect that I also wanted to dig upon. How fit are you to take over responsibilities after 55?
Correct.
And
Hashan, I have heard, I don't have the literature to quote. I have heard that surgeons are not supposed to do, you know, operations after the age of 50 or 55. They are not, you know, legally bound to do any operations. So I need to touch upon that as well.
Yeah. There are cases like that in Sri Lanka too, where you tend to move away from the frame like after like 65, 70, and you get angry when a patient wants to pull out a tooth and say, look, do it my way. So meaning there's a level that, you know, even surgeons, dentists, and all the other professions, and including us, it can happen to us once we started aging. But when you extend, yeah, you're absolutely right. It can run into a social issue. And also, seriously agree with you, Dr. Dinesh, with regards to the new generation. They want to be the CEO of the company by the age of 28 or 30 or 35. When we were young, our CEOs like, 55, 60, very matured, with gray hair. But now it's totally the other way. So, Dr. Dinesh, thank you for the eye opener. But you basically paved the way to Dr. Anuradha, who's a researcher and who's going to speak a lot about categorization of the whole thing, what the deeper subject that you just touched upon, right? So, Dr. Dinesh, thank you. And Dr. Anuradha, now this brings the question to me. Do you think raising the bar to the age 60 in our country will be a better move? That's number one. Number two, what is your view, since you're a researcher, based on employee engagement perspective, right? What is your honest opinion with regards to the categorization that just Dr. Dinesh touched upon?
First of all, I thank Professor Vatawala, Mr. Dinwila, as well as Dr. Dinesh, as well as all the panel, all the participants. And thank you very much, Mr. Hashan, for these valuable questions. Actually, those are very valuable questions. And my view is we have to concern about the employees who has high level of employee engagement. Because engaged employees are only the assets to the organization, not the other employees. And we have to take some sort of mechanisms, case by case, as well as industry by industry, in order to extend the retirement age only for the engaged employees. And why I focus on extending the retirement age of employees who has high level of employee engagement, the reason is the consequences of employee engagement. The consequences of employee engagement are high level of employee job performance as well as high level of organizational financial performance. These are tested as well as proven by researchers such as Anita in 2014, Harter and other researchers in 2002, as well as I also did research on consequences of employee engagement with the support of two other researchers called Senior Professor Opatha and Senior Professor Kennedy Gunawardena. And my view is if we extend the retirement age of engaged employees, not only the company or the organization get benefit, but also the employee, that particular energetic employee also get benefit because they can earn more, as well as that is a psychological factor. So they have okay, I'm contributing to the organization few more years, like that. And another thing is, there are various organizations, and one famous organization is called Gallup. They conduct research on, especially on employee engagement, and they once in every 3 years, they present reports on employee engagement levels worldwide. And can anyone guess what is the worldwide percentage of employee engagement in 2017? That is the last report. Due to Corona, they couldn't do research in 2020. Can anyone guess what is the employee engagement level worldwide? Maybe 80, maybe 90, maybe 50? No, obviously it's 15%. 1.5, it's very low. Because that's why most of the panelists say they are about the burdens or the disadvantages. But if we have some sort of a mechanism to identify who are the engaged employees and extend their retirement age, then most of the problems will be solved. And this Gallup report identified 3 categories of employees, that is engaged employees, disengaged employees, and actively disengaged employees. And if time permits, I will briefly explain these categories.
Another, let me disturb you. Can you re-establish those 3 categories again for the benefit of the viewer?
3 categories are, according to Gallup organization, their report in 2017, engaged employees, disengaged employees, and actively disengaged employees. Actively disengaged.
Okay. Okay. Yeah. Please continue. Okay.
Okay. Mr. Hashan, if time permits, I can briefly explain about the 3 categories.
Yeah. Please. Please.
Okay. So the engaged employees they are very innovative. They are very energetic, as well as they are very creative, and they are good team players, and their absenteeism is low. And nowadays we face some sort of problem, the retention of employees. They don't retain for an organization for several years. They'll quit. But the beauty of these employees, their retention level is high. And another thing, when we move with the people in the organization and when we work for an organization, since we all are human beings, grievances come. Some likes and dislikes arrive. And the beauty of these engaged employees is when they move with the society, they don't spread the negativity of the organization with the society. The engaged employees, they spread or they talk positively about the organization when they move with the society. And they take, and also they take an extra effort when they are achieving the organizational goals. And obviously the second category, disengaged employees, obviously the opposite side of these people. Then what is the third category? Actively disengaged. The word called actively, it's quite, the gravity is there. So actively disengaged employees are not only disengaged, but they are try to undo whatever the engaged people do. Whatever the engaged people do, they try to destroy. They are very dangerous. So those are the 3 categories of employees, and we have to concern and we have to identify some sort of a mechanism to retain only the engaged employees. That is my viewpoint.
Right, Doctor. Oh, now again, it's basically the extension of Dr. Dinesh's cons area, because you made it our lives easy, Dr. Anuradha, because now we have 3 categories. We have engaged, disengaged, and actively disengaged, basically the criminal version of the disengaged. Right now, this leads to let's argue, 3 of us, and I hope Professor is also there. There are people posing questions now. I want to know, Dr. Dinesh, now.
Yeah.
actively thrive upon the engaged, disengaged, and actively disengaged one, right?
Actively disengaged.
Yeah. Now, how to get these, catch, select from your organization and retain them and get rid of the others, right? I just want to know what kind of a pandemonium will happen, and also the yardstick to measure who are actively engaged. Now, if the population, I mean, world categorization or the world, what you call percentage is 15%, imagine an organization, it can be 1%, it can be 2%, right? Considered to the world population. Dr. Dinesh, can you touch upon
Yeah,
how
yeah.
to maintain the
Yeah, Ashan, this employee engagement, I truly believe Dr. Anuradha also properly, articulated in the academic context, because I have seen, it has been proven, I have touched and felt that people who are disengaged are not properly adding value to the organization. Because I have been in many employee engagement, motivation sessions in many organizations, especially in Unilever context, because employer is doing lots of activities, campaigns to get this employee engagement fuel up, because otherwise if you are not motivated to value add, take the organization into next level. I mean, we do lots of activities, maybe parties, maybe motivation sessions, recreation, sports, lots of things to get people mixed and feel happy during the work hours. Then they feel and fuel to do addition, portion to the organization. Then the organization can, get the real growth, especially into innovation, all the stress levels will be, fade away. So, if you get this real employee engagement, it doesn't mean that you get into a ground and do sports, but they mix up, they get into a lot of cross, not cross-cultural, cross-functional activities, marketing people will go into the field and do some research, people, sales reps who do selling out in the field will come to factory and do some projects, quality checking. A lot of mix will happen, lot of new knowledge will get into the organization, and a lot of enthusiasm, passion will even, fuel into the organization, which can be, cashed up, really get cashed up. So in terms of yardstick, lot of people, good organizations, they have, quantitative measures to different, take qualitative aspect and make it quantitative, and they measure how is the employee engagement level in this particular organization, and they check how was the last year and what was the performance, how is this year, what was the performance. I can vouch that when the engagement is getting, deteriorated, your organization performance would have gone crazy.
Right, doctor. Yeah, I agree. And yes, Rohan.
What was discussed by Dr. Anuradha and Dr. Dinesh, I think this very key factor is how the law is very disconnected from the requirements of businesses.
Businesses.
We take a very archaic approach and try to make it all black and white. But as a practitioner, one of the key elements that I've always noted is how employer considerations, the requirements of the times, the business requirements, etc., are not really taken into consideration. And that's another aspect I see in this piece of legislation, proposed piece of legislation. It's very vague in respect of what was discussed by Dr. Dinesh and Dr. Anuradha. There is no provision, there is no mechanism in the statute itself, apart from saying, okay, going forward, age of retirement is going to be 60, you have to deal with it. There is no proactive approach being made available to employers to discontinue or take into consideration performance, etc.
Yeah.
And retain the quality people.
Quality people, correct.
That's a dilemma.
Yeah, right, Mr. Hall. And Professor, I have one question to you. You have crossed many generations and you have seen people, right? And what is your view on tackling this issue of, okay, take them to the 60 number, 60th year of pushing them to work. I mean, after 48 or after 50, basically, it comes down. Certain people retain very strong, but for majority, I mean, research proves, like Dr. Anuradha said, it's only 15% of the world population that is highly engaged, meaning other people have basically given up or destroying engage people's work. Professor, I want your view as a veteran, as a very prominent personality in the country. You have crossed many ages, generations, right? What's your view on this? Let's argue.
Yeah. Thanks, Hashan. I think I've listened to the different views. I'm sure that they are within what they say. But just to talk on the age itself, I don't know whether most of them remember that our earlier age was 60 years. You see, when they changed to 55 years, they gave the option to those who have signed agreements or who are employed to that at 60 years to continue up to 60 years.
Correct.
So in this sort of exercise, I think where we are making a change, we need to have some options available, because definitely people are not going to change easily. So this is something that one may have to say, if we are going to extend from 55 to 60, either the employer has to look at it or the employee. So who will be able to take the decision? So this is one area that one maybe have to do it. Maybe you can't do it at least for a few years, at least 5 years or 10 years or whatever.
Yeah.
We say 5 years. So then there is some sort of agreement that will arise and people can take action. Then the other thing is on this engagement. Now, actually, I think Dr. Anuradha mentioned about this, but on the engagement, it is not only the employee. You see, if the employer doesn't give the opportunity to the employee to develop, then that is a key indication, no? Because you see, I can just give you one example. You take the public servant in India, you see when they are taken in for or recruited, they are giving a thorough training to them. Every ministry has their own training institution. They are trained. If you speak to their secretaries or higher officers, they are very well conversant, and not just yes people. They are able to analyze. Now we had those people during the civil service period, but they were learned people who did it. But now the thing is entirely different, because we are giving employment to the people who can't get a job. The government is giving jobs to people who can't get jobs. You see, the government must, earlier the policy was government recruits the cream of the university people who pass out first class. Without a first class, you can't get into government service. So that's why, so our concepts have all changed, and
garbage in, garbage out.
Doing away with the Public Service Commission is really one of the major problems that have occurred, because politics have got into it. So we need to, if we are really going to develop, we have to look at systems and procedures and ensure that those are done. Politicians can come, politicians come, go, because they are temporary people, but we need the public servants who will have to be skilled, who will have to be trained. These CPD programs you are talking of should be a regular occurrence in the public sector. I don't think they know anything what is happening. If they came, because we are giving this free, they could have come, but they don't want to come. They want to go home, So that's why. So these is some of my observations that I have. We need to be flexible on how we are going to implement this. That's what I feel. You can't have a hard and fast rule, but give a little flexibility for at least 5 to 10 years and then go on.
I fully agree. Rohan, there's a question being posed from by the name of Priyanta Perera. This is for private board, electricity board, is referring corporations and government organizations, and what is the total percentage of workmen who entitled for this act?
So this is excluding corporations and government service. Government service and corporations are governed by the Establishments Code, like I said earlier. This is essentially for the private sector. It doesn't extend beyond that, because those categories of employees are specifically excluded.
Right.
Ashan, if I can just mention something, there is a social problem on this, because when a person retires as 55 years, now with this median age going up, the age of marriage, all those things are getting postponed. So you see at 55, they have very young children. And they may, how are they going to say meet their demands, send them to school? So this is another social problem that is there. One has to look into.
Yeah.
Might I only add to what Professor Watawala just said? I agree with him in respect of his thoughts on this matter. Another aspect is when we consider extension, I don't necessarily consider it something bad, but one must also keep in mind that the government shouldn't burden the private sector to meet all their needs. Now, by doing this, in essence, each private sector employee is taxed on their income for a further 5 years. Their obligation towards the state increases by a further 5 years. On the converse, the state's obligation towards its citizens is reduced by 5 years. So I sincerely hope that this is not a piece of legislation designed to milk the private sector employees any further. Because as it is, I'm fairly sure, as private sector people yourselves, you all are well aware, that there's a huge burden cast upon individuals when it comes to tax and the like.
Right. And Dr. Anuradha, there's another question posed from Priyanta again asking, sorry, Dr. Anuradha, let me rebound this to Rohan once again. He's asking, is NGOs are in the private sector category?
Technically speaking, yes, they fall under the Shop and Office Employees Act. So long as they operate in Sri Lanka, those employees are governed by all local laws.
All right. Okay. Thank you.
Registered.
So there goes the answer to Priyanta Perra. And Dr. Anuradha, there is one question from an anonymous person. What are the actions company gets to actively disengage? You know, he's asking what are the actions that the organizations can get with regards to disengage people, right? Plus, where they're harmful to others. Are these actions get them after they destroy others' future or before? What is your recommendation?
Before is better.
Before is better. Sooner the better, is it? Right?
Because first we have to have some sort of a mechanism to identify who are the actively disengaged employees, and then we can take some lawful actions. And I think Mr. Dunuvila is the most suitable person to answer for what type of legal actions that we can take for the people who are doing sabotage or destroying whatever the engaged people do.
Just to take up from where Dr. Anuradha left off. So there are two categories that we must consider here. There are the category of people who are merely incompetent and do not have the skill set required by the company. Now, those actions are not or won't fall within the definition of a misconduct. In such an event, the only way to get rid of them would be to make an application to the Commissioner General of Labour under the Termination Act, pay them now up to a maximum of 2.5 million and then ask them to go. Now, again, the problem here is the actively disengaged employees who are proactively trying to run a company or an employer down is now asked to, is burdened with having to pay that person to ask him to go. So like I said, there's a lot of disconnect between what the law is and what the requirements of business is.
Right. Dr. Dinesh, how Samir is asking, how could we get ready, how could the country can be ready for the industrial 4.0, especially under COVID-19 situation, without grabbing technology with youngsters, if we are going to retain old talent for another 5 years. But what he's asking is, let me clear it for you. Now, how the country is going to get ready for the industrial 4.0. And now at the same time, we need to push 55 to 60. And what's going to happen to the young guys? You touch this, but he's asking in a kind of a deeper sense. But what's going to happen to the younger people?
So why, if younger people are having some issues, there is one answer in my perspective, Hashan.
Right.
We should remove this word called retirement. I mean, retirement word should be removed from the vocabulary. It's a bad, poisonous word. You are encouraging people to getting into a second honeymoon, basically.
Right.
And the age shouldn't be the criteria for that particular word called retirement. Because age is not a barrier. Because I have seen people who are really performing at age of 70. You can, consider the factors like your efficiency, your performance in the company, your engagement, other so many factors are there. My proposal is make the retirement or whatever the age floating and agile. Let it be any age. If company decides, okay, this particular person retirement age must be 75, let the person decide after negotiating with the company. If one person who is actively disengaged and he, poisonous to the company, some mechanism, he get rid of, get out from the bus even at the age of 40. So that's the long-term solution for this thing, because we are limiting, keeping a legal barrier. Okay, you are getting into a honeymoon by age of 55. Now it's, extending 55 to 60. I mean, when you reach that, no engagement. I mean, disengagement will automatically we are asking for.
Right. Right.
Ashan, if I can I just make a small comment?
Please.
Now this all depends. Now, actually, at the moment, we are taking the position that our economy is stagnant. We are not expanding. As a result, we are trying to create jobs for people who are retiring. But if we are really going to expand, because our country has to develop our economy. Now, supposing if we have skilled people, now the younger people who are coming out, and then foreign investors and others come in, and they start new projects here, especially using the skills, because in the 1970s, when we started the free trade zones, we had cheap labor. But now our strategy should be to have skilled people. If we have the skilled people, then all the foreigners like in India, they will come here. We will be able to start, especially in the IT area, projects, which will mean that everyone will automatically extend the ages of everyone, because you see, then the demand is there, But at the moment, we are talking of no expansion, no demand. We are just stagnant,
Right.
Ashan, just to give you another example, now I have seen a lot of paper advertisement asking for good retired army people for big, big job opportunities. I mean, we are giving them a message: you are incapable, but we are asking you to come and work.
Come back.
I mean, we as the industry professionals creating that, lethargic frame within them and discourage them to. I mean, we are tagging them on a negative note.
Right. And Dr. Dinesh, I mean, it's absolutely right, because you need to remove this retirement word from the vocabulary. And also, like what Professor said, when we ask people to come here and work, we are automatically moving into that level, right? But my concern is now, even there is I need to reconfirm with Rohan. Rohan, this act is for the private sector. It's not for the public sector, is it? Again, I need to reconfirm.
Yeah, that's right, Hassan. These aimed at the private sector only. Now, just to recap of something Dr. Dinesh and Professor Vatawala said. Earlier, prior to this act, we didn't have a retirement age. It was for individuals, companies, individual employers to decide the retirement age.
Okay.
Now, forcing upon everybody a retirement age. Earlier, as Dr. Dinesh correctly pointed out, we used to keep the better people even up to the age of 60, 70, or even beyond that, depending on their competency, skill level, and their actual productivity. But now, you can't do that anymore.
Right. So,
Ashan, the retirement age date should be the date you die. So till you die, you can write, you can lecture, you can teach, you can consult. If you're incapable physically, you can online do so many things.
Yeah.
So we as professionals and professional bodies, take some creative action to remove this wrong tagging.
Right. And also now this leads to another issue, Dr. Dinesh, Dr. Hamangoda, and on all the people who are engaged right now. Let's argue upon it, because there are questions coming in. Now say, how about the public sector? I mean, aren't there any? Why only for the private sector? Now I'm confused, Rohan, Dr. Dinesh, Dr. Hamangoda. I mean, why not? The legislation is pushing the public servants. I mean, if you go to a public entity, still the president is trying to make it extremely active. But I mean, you ring up today, the Labor Department. I rang up and there's no answer. There's no answer.
Yeah, so Hashan, just to take up on that point, again, this goes to show what the actual intention of the government might be in at this juncture, bringing this piece of legislation in.
Right.
Now, the establishment code says your age of retirement is 55. With a special provision there for each department head to decide whether a certain employee ought to be given extensions. Now, that is the system we had in the private sector as well.
Correct.
Now,
Yeah.
this is the question, why this act is coming in at this juncture, compelling private sector employers to keep it until 60.
Right. Okay. So, I mean, meaning there is a motive behind it.
Well, one would have to assume so, because this is selective. This is not aimed at all categories of workers across the board. It is selective to the private sector. They specifically exclude the government sector employees from this piece of legislation.
So, Mr. Rohan Dhunubila, now, is this act is effect? I mean, is it in operation or is it still under discussion?
Not yet. It's at bill stage. Next,
Right.
will be put on an order paper, debated, and possibly amendments may come in if a debate is taken up on this matter. And till the final act is passed, it is difficult to know what the actual changes and the final product will be. So we are going on a bill which is to be debated and amendments to be incorporated into it prior to it coming into law.
Okay, so there goes the answer to Priyanta. And Gayan is asking, there are some employees who like to retire at 60, but at the same time, they are preferred to claim the EPF, ETF gratuity at the age of 55 due to their higher family commitment at around the age 55. So the requests are already coming to consider retirement from the payroll at 55 to claim those benefits and to work another 5 years on contract basis or as a freelance consultant. These practical issues already there on ground, and you may discuss depending on your time availability with the panel. So Gayan is asking a very critical question. Shall I throw this to Dr. Dinesh?
My basic, solution to this problem is you should have some mechanism to detach your terminal benefit, in the window and your retirement age. Because if you make both at the same, juncture, the problem comes.
Right.
Why we mix all, both these things together? There should be a mechanism, okay? Whenever if there's a, financial commitment, there should be a window to get an installment or whatever. And your working till the retirement should go on. Otherwise, because of this merely, sheer financial objective, you're terminating your superb career. So my solution is that,
Dr. Dinesh,
Hashan,
yes, Professor.
Yeah, Hashan. Okay, yeah. Okay, Rohan, you do. Yeah.
Sorry, Professor. Just to add to it now, the EPF access 50 for females and 55 for males. Now, with the Retirement Act coming in, once it does come in and goes up to 60, unless there is specific provision to say that the age for withdrawal also is to be linked to the age of retirement statute, those two ages will remain. So females will still be able to collect at 50 and males at 55.
Oh.
Right.
Then no problem.
Yeah.
Yes, I think that flexibility should be given. If that flexibility is there, I don't think there should be a problem.
And also, see, I'll throw this to all the members who are engaged with me right now. Gayan is asking another question. Whatever retirement age, 55, 60 or 65, etc., isn't this has to be applied to politicians as well?
Extremely pertinent question. The age of retirement should have come in for them first, be that as it may.
No, I mean, it has to start with them, I believe, Rohan.
Yes.
Right? So the cap should be put to them first.
You start politics at 55, Then that is what they are asking to do,
That's a good one.
Now and not a social service as it was once upon a time.
Yeah.
Make a business out of it, then you want to go on as long as you possibly can.
Right. Dr. Anwar, Samir is asking another question. Regards to the gravity, because of the gravity, there will be a problem. If some employees are asked to break his or her service by age 55 or 50 years, and employer allowed it with relevant, payments, and employer again allow employee to rejoin soon. So he's asking, you retire and you come back. Is the employee eligible to ask for what you call gratuity for additional years up to his or her 60-year base on not interrupted EPF, ETF? So what he's asking, once it's broken and extended, right? Is this EPF, ETF, can he reconnect? I mean, I posed this to Dr. Anwar as well as to Rohan, because now I see a problem, because once you are terminated or once you're retired, means that, I mean, I should not use the word retirement, because it should, as Dr. Dinesh suggested, that once you think that you are unable, because once you cross to 51, automatically, like Dr. Dinesh said, there is a psychic that comes into you saying that I can't work. And therefore, I need to destroy, or I need to, I mean, we have come across, Dr. Dinesh and I had come across in one particular time of life, a particular people like that. And we had a lot of discussion. And now it's coming like a film into my mind, right? The amount of discussions we had as to what to do for them. But I mean, can't let them sacked or can't let them asked to go, because they are pillars of the company, and they are, people look at them as our seniors, and seniors
Founders.
founders. They come at their own way, and they're not listening to young CEOs. So now, once you break it, when you come back, aren't you taking a headache in, or aren't you taking actively disengaged or a disengaged person in and making a trouble once you extend that person's working contract to 60? What is your view? I want both of you, Dr. Anurag and Rohan, to debate upon this. Once it breaks, I feel it has to be, let him go, and you should not.
I didn't get you, Mr. Hashan, properly, because what I feel is you ask about once you break the contract of an actively disengaged person, and you ask again that person to come in. Or
No, we don't know whether this guy is actively engaged or not, but he can pose himself as an actively engaged character. Now imagine if I bring this, if I'm the labor minister, okay, tomorrow I'm going to implement Dr. Anuradha's categorization. So there'll be people who can really mask it. So they are now ready. They are at the age of 54. Now they're masking, right?
yeah,
And
but my view is, Mr. Hashan, at the age of 54 or something like that, then when a person is working for an organization, maybe 1 year is enough. Then we can identify that person's behavior, characteristics, and everything. So whether that person is creative, innovative, and what are the characteristics are there, engaged employees characteristics are there. And my proposal is to keep only those people, not the actively disengaged people. And the other thing is, once the actively disengaged person try to undone or destroy whatever the engaged person do, that comes under legal point also. Then we can take some legal action, as the previous question that an anonymous person asked for me as well as Mr. Dunuvila. So then we can take some sort of an legal action. So my point is,
okay, yeah, go ahead, doctor.
my point is keep only engaged employees.
Right.
That's the thing.
So yeah, Dr. Dunuvila, I mean, I need your opinion as well. Are we creating a chaos?
The question was that in the event of a cessation of employment at 55 and re-engagement thereafter for a further period of 5 years, whether you are still entitled to gratuity, etc., for the total period of service.
Right.
That was the question. Correct me if I'm wrong.
Yes. Yeah.
That is the correct question. What the gratuity act says is the minute you complete 5 years in service, uninterrupted service, you qualify to be paid gratuity. Now, a lot of companies I have experienced is that for various reasons, employees retire at a certain age merely to collect their gratuity check. There is a break in service. The following day, they are re-employed under a different EPF number and continue to work till retirement.
Okay.
And then the period taken in for consideration of gratuity is that second period. Now, that's how generally it happens. Now, we have also seen instances where people do that, have an artificial break, as I call it, come back to work the following day under a new number. And when things get bitter between parties, they say, look, my employer forced me to retire for whatever extraneous reason, but I am being an employee for 20 years as opposed to the 5 years that he's worked after the break.
Right.
Commissioner of General of Labor will inquire into it and say, yes, this is an artificial break. You have to take his full period of service into consideration for the payment of gratuity. Now, this defeats the arrangement that the employer and employee had at a certain stage.
Right.
And the employer is now saddled with a position where he has to pay an enhanced gratuity in consideration of the full term of employment.
Right.
This is a very common issue a lot of employers have. So to answer that question, if you're having a break, you have to have a meaningful break. There has to be a proper cessation of employment.
Dr. Dunivila, now, yeah, okay, go ahead.
And re-employing on whatever basis thereafter must be on a fresh contract that can be independent of the work and contract that he was in prior to the cessation.
Mutually exclusive. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Right. Dr. Dunivila, there's another question that, like Dr. Anuradha said, okay, once we categorize these people and once we identify, okay, these guys are actively engaged, but these guys are not, they're actively, but they are basically disconnected. Now, when we try to segregate these two categories, on the lines of retirement age, aren't we creating a legal issue?
Yeah, Mano. Yeah, I'm at
I didn't get
the seminar. I am
Now,
involved at the moment. What time are you all starting this?
It's already started. Dr. Vipin will be joining.
Okay. Now, as Dr. Anuradha said, we are supposed to categorize and select because it's only 15%. I mean, if you apply to a company, it can be, if you take, say, 1,000 employees, and it's only 15% of who are actively engaged. Now, when we categorize them through a very stringent evaluation process, and we ask others, okay, fine, you can leave, or we give them a kind of a process to leave, aren't we creating a kind of a pandemonium with regards to the legal aspects of it?
Yes, now we see that even today, that's the whole idea of having evaluations, human resource development, the area of human resources has developed to such an extent where we monitor, evaluate employees almost on a daily basis. So at the end of the year, once the evaluation is done, there is a rating system, there's active employee engagement in giving his or her input into that evaluation. So it's not a unilateral evaluation that we have in most cases. It's a bilateral evaluation system where both parties can come together and agree, okay, this is where you are at this moment.
Right.
Now,
Okay.
the issue is when that agreed rating is not suitable for the company. What do you do next? So if it's a performance related matter only, for example, you are expecting a rating of 5 and you have a rating of 2, and you essentially means that you are not up to date or you can't keep up with the business requirements. What do you do next? Situations like that, you can't ask an employee to go home. Unfortunately, we can't do that because there's a positive rule of law under the Termination of Employment Special Provisions Act, which says employees such as those employees must be terminated with the written concurrence of the Commissioner General of Labor.
Okay.
If it's a disciplinary matter, if it's ill-discipline issue, then not a problem. Employer can take whatever action they deem appropriate. Now, when you go before the Commissioner of Labor and try to position yourself and say, these are the reasons why we can't have this employee anymore, the Commissioner still has the discretion to decide whether the application made by the employee is valid or not. the commissioner can come to a finding and say, no, we think what you're saying is utter rubbish, you keep the employee. Now then what is the position of the company?
Company.
Essentially, you're forced to keep in employment a person that is, in fact, is not suited.
Okay.
So that discretion with the commissioner, my personal belief is that while that discretion, some supervising authority should remain, it should not be the sole authority, because an employer will not reach out in general circumstances unless there's some animosity between parties. 99.9% of the time, it will be a genuine application to the commissioner to say that X is not suitable for this company any longer.
Okay.
And should the employer have that freedom to make that determination? At the end of the day, it's not a charity. It's a profit-making venture designed to make the most amount of profits for the shareholders of that company. It's simple as that. So why are we having another body saying, no, you have to look at a social element of that? There are pros and cons. We can argue about this for days. But why are you forcibly imposing another standard on an employer when it's a profit-making venture?
Okay. All right. Okay. Dr. Hamangoda, so in as a whole, this is a total human resource action that needs to be implemented stringently. I use that word, isn't it?
Yes. And
Right.
based on performance evaluation and those things also, we have to link with these.
And also the leaders have to be very cautious to
Of course,
select the best team.
I have to add something about that. As Professor Watawala said previously, he said, Professor Watawala said, company also has to do something about in order to enhance employee engagement. That is the leadership. Because the researchers like Sejit and Krim, in their research in 2006, they identified that leader has to play a huge role in order to enhance the level of employee engagement. And we have identified it's like sort of an exchange. That means Ganudenua, if the leader gave some career path to career development, opportunity to career development, and leader maybe the moment they found a good performance of the employee, if the leader is congratulate and appreciate the performance, then the employee's engagement level goes high. If the leaders provide positive stuff, then as an exchange, the employee engagement increase. That's what I think you have asked Mr. Hashan.
So that's a pro. That's a pro, not a con.
Leader has a huge role to play in order to enhance the level of employee engagement.
So finally, we have a pro. Right.
Hashan, I have a question for Rohan. Now, Rohan, actually, in all these legislation, one of the areas which is of prime importance is the productivity. Now, this is not mentioned anywhere in any legislation or anything, but a lot of the problems what we were talking of is relating to that. Do you think that there is any way that we can bring that in so that the productivity could come in this any legislation that we are putting in?
Ideally, Professor, that should be the case. At the end of the day, your worth as an employee is gauged by your productivity. I'll give you an example with the recent gazette of the government about increasing the basic minimum wage of the estate staff to 1,000. Now, earlier, prior to that, a lot of the estate companies, what they did was they had a basic salary and a productivity bonus. So if you have attendance of 75%, for example, you were given a bonus. And amount, depending on the amount of leaf you collect, you are given a bonus. So you are given that opportunity to enhance your income. Now what has happened is when you say you're given 1,000 rupees a day, regardless of what you do, and in this present context, when the tea industry in Sri Lanka is not doing that well, the other side of the coin has not been considered. You're absolutely right, Professor, when you say that there has to be legislation brought in to gauge the value of an employee based on productivity. not only for the private sector, that should be equally applicable in the state sector as well. And that is an absolutely vital piece of legislation that needs to be brought in. But I have reasonable doubt that it ever will.
Actually,
Right.
this is how Singapore developed, productivity. They brought in productivity, and that's how they really developed.
Right. Professor, there's a question being posed. What can Chartered Professional Managers Institute can do to help the people who are facing this issue? What, as an entity, what we can do, how we can help nationally to get these non-active or non-engaged to engaged level as a institute.
Because what we are doing today is also getting our members and others involved who are doing it. But if you see really on the other areas, it has to be what we are. Anyway, the same CPD area will apply, training and development is the best method by which we can really improve ourselves. Without that, it's really going to be very, very difficult to do it.
Right. And Dr. Dinesh, Shiranta is asking, he says like this, just my opinion, a private sector employee who is aspiring to be an entrepreneur once they retire, because he or she will have the capital through the provident fund, will be denied or delayed by raising the retiring age. We must encourage and produce more entrepreneurs who then will be more beneficial to the country and economy.
Correct.
So
I'm totally in that.
Right. By leaving this age 55 as the retirement age, country will benefit on both ends, meaning the younger guys take the companies forward and the age get into entrepreneurship. And this is just my thought. What do you think? I think
that's a good concept, Hashan. We should, foster entrepreneurship in this country. So my philosophy is, while if possible, even at age of 55 or whatever, you think of something entrepreneurial. If government or companies can release that money, at least, after 50 or 55 or whatever, in installments to people to getting into, self-employment and other, entrepreneurial activities. I mean, private sector and government sector should foster that. And my philosophy is, till you're being employed in private sector, government sector, you have a business plan and slowly initiate certain, concepts while you're properly retired or out of the work. You can, highly get engaged in that. So don't wait till you're, 60 or 55, that age, to think and initiate that. So if as much as possible, we should encourage company to release that money in installment. So by the time he's physically, inverted commas retired, they are on it. I mean, not as the first day of their self-employment or on their own. They have some sort of a company to, develop. That's my philosophy.
Right. So one final question to, including me. So raising the retirement age, now 80% or 70% of the conversation, we talked about the cons or the
issues,
possible issues that can arise. Excluding what Dr. Anurag said, what are the other pros that you will see as panelists, and including me? I'll also put my 2 cents into this. Any pros that we can see once we raise the bar to 60? Now, example, I read in a foreign article, they say, okay, at 55, you're mentally agile. Physically, you might not, right? At 60, you're seriously matured. So organization needs your thinking to move forward. So that's one side of the positive side of this thing. Number 2, mentoring. You can take the professionals who are aged and how they have disciplined themselves. I mean, what kind of actions they have taken to lecture the young leaders who's going to take over. So likewise, physically, you might not, but mentally you are extremely powerful. And on contrary, on the other side, there are veterans who are still going strong physically and mentally even at the age of 70. even at the age of 75, even at the age of 80, they are still holding together. Now, if I can refer to a character in Sri Lanka, there's a eminent cricket legend or coach called Mr. Nelson Mendes, who's 83 now, still going strong, right? Still advising the younger guys, the younger captains, or who are playing, who are coming into the arena, and the discipline of the coach. So I'm looking at a pro. Are there any other pros of escalating this to 60? Dr. Dinesh?
Yeah, I think Hashan, I gave you the answer. It's for me, it's a clear pro. Because once you establish psychologically in the system that there is no such a, a physical
Barrier.
retirement,
Okay.
once you redefine that, philosophy,
Right.
everyone will motivated to get into that.
Right.
And
Right.
when you're physically, incapable, there should be any means, getting consultation, teaching, and so on. And the total, the structure should be made by leaders like us.
Okay.
Give them the opportunity to. If you can't walk, there are some certain, platforms you can work. Online
Exactly.
platforms are there.
Okay.
So it's a clear pro. Your date of death should be the retirement.
Retirement. Remove
Yeah,
this retirement, what do you call, word from the vocabulary and start thinking positively.
You can't retire.
Super.
So
And
once you retire means you're physically
up.
disengaged with the community, and your mental capacity will be deteriorated till the time goes on. So if you're not physically and mentally active in the society, you're psychologically detached from the total system.
Okay. Dr. Anuradha?
Yeah, I totally agree with Dr. Dinesh and Mr. Hashan, because if I give an example from my field, like that the academic field, there are a lot of good professors and senior professors. If we ask them to retire, then the younger generation will not get an opportunity to get their knowledge as well as the experience, because that is why the retirement age is quite problematic, and that word retirement we have to remove, as Dr. Dinesh said.
Right. And Mr. Rohan?
I do agree with those sentiments of both Dr. Dinesh and Dr. Anuradha. Even in my field, we see that the most senior lawyers who are well into their 80s,
yes,
they possess and their capacity to teach a new generation of lawyers is phenomenal. If you just put a number and say from tomorrow you can't come to work, it's a huge loss to an industry or to a profession. So I don't think we should label anybody and say this is your age of retirement. I completely agree with that. One downside is if at all, is when it comes to actual physical work, where people are engaged in a more physically environment. Intellectually, it's not a problem at all. You can go up till the day you die. We've seen that. We've seen a lot of speakers talk about this. So that knowledge, the intellectual, the experience people of age have, is you can't compare it to any knowledge that you can gain from a book or watching a YouTube.
Correct. The tacit knowledge, yeah.
Right. Professor, last but not the least.
Yeah, I quite agree with what was said by you all, because there are certainly positive factors. But even if you look at the one sector that was left out was the public sector, say 1.2 million or 1.3 million public sector, and maybe 2.6 million in the private sector. So 50% in the public sector. I think they also need to be considered, because otherwise there can be a major problem that these positive things, if they are going to extend, it has to also come from the public sector. And if the government is making some decision without looking at their own self, the government side, they are now only looking at the private sector side, so which means they need to listen to the private sector in order that the benefits will be given to everyone. So I feel this is a good thing, especially with the aging population. And we should work it out, but beneficial to all parties, not just trying to impose something, but it will be beneficial to all parties.
Right, Professor, thank you very much. And this brings to the end of raising the retirement age, pros and the cons, the 24th sector of CPM.